Hi guys, welcome back to our Porsche restoration project. Today we're going to go over the last of the remaining parts and pieces to set up our tunnel. So we're getting ready to set the car back on the ground now. It's going to be necessary to have a fully functioning handbrake. So we're going to go over how to set that guy up in there and get both cables balanced out. Also we're going to go over the shifter rod and shift rod coupler, and then set up our shifter with the springs and cover plate. And then we're going to install our accelerator pedal and go over some new accelerator rod bushings. So these are from Porsche. Stephen from Texas brought these to my attention, so we're going to go over these in detail and show you what's involved to set those up. Okay, so let's break this down piece by piece. First, let's get started with the accelerator rod bushings. So here's a close-up look at our accelerator rod bushings and part number from Porsche. So there, 3 of these would be required to set this up in the tunnel properly. What had happened, so I went ahead and did the video on installing the tunnel lines, and just going off of photography I had and notes that we had drawn dismantling the tunnel, these actually were not in there. So whether they didn't make it in from Porsche or whether they were in there and got lost at some point through servicing, very hard to say, but photography doesn't show any indication that there was ever anything in there. Even when we drew notes on it, we made a note that there was no rubber support system regarding this rod at all, so it's quite long. And what's going to happen, because of the length of the rod, you can get some sag in there. So what these really are designed to do is to carry the rod, take some of the slack out of it, without actually pinching it. You can see the diameter is quite large. So it's important when we set these up in there that they are exactly parallel with each other. If one's a little bit high or a little bit low to the other one, you could actually get some friction in your accelerator line and potentially seize it. So got to be very, very careful with those. If you don't run them in there, you would need some kind of a padding or some kind of a guide or glide for the cable to rest against or rub up against. But without them, I would think you'd get some vibrational noise. Okay, let's take these out to the tunnel. Go ahead and slide this rod back in. I'll show you how those work. Okay, so we got our accelerator rod pushed back through the tunnel there, coming in from the back end. And so what I've done, you can see in the previous video that I had in the tunnel lines, I actually had a piece of felt, sticky back felt, that was lining this area. Go ahead and pull that out of there and place the rubber bushing in there, and that just pinches down just enough so where our 2 pieces come together, but not really clamping down on it too hard. So there's no way that can fall out of there, but we're not actually applying any pressure to the rod. So I'd say that'd probably be the best starting point. Once we got that guy in there, let's go ahead and move to the front, put that one in. So here's our front one just kind of setting in place there. It's just slightly pinched down with our tabs. Then take a look at our center here. So how much flex that has in there. Right now it's got a little bit of a crown in the cable. So also you can see when I'm pressing down on that, quite a bit up and down action with our ball joint there. So what we want to do, we want to go ahead and hook that up to the linkage so that stabilizes the front end. I've got the back end stabilized as best I can with the rubber boot hooked to the back side, although it's not 100%, should get us in the ballpark. What we want to do is we want to secure the front and back ends before we play around with the middle adjustment. So let's go ahead and snap that in there and then see what that looks like. Okay, a little dark down in here, but you can see got the ball socket loaded up with some petroleum grease in there, and actually starting to feel pretty good right there. So let's go ahead and hook up the accelerator pedal, and that way we just make sure everything is fully stabilized here up front before we move on to the middle. So before we install our accelerator pedal, it's probably a good idea to put our backing board in at this time. Just on the driver's side, you can see I have all the areas behind it already done with our soundproofing, so be no reason to get back in there after that. Okay, that should do it. And then a little red rubber grease in our socket. Put our rod in there. presses in and then sits down here. So we'll go ahead and bolt that down, and that should stabilize everything up front. Okay, and then tightening that down. We don't want to over tighten that because we're actually biting down into rubber. We could cut the rubber if we over tighten. Right about there. All right about there. Okay, I can hear some things going on. Also, I can feel some things catching in the back end. Okay, let's take a look and see what's going on here. So what I was feeling from the accelerator pedal is the rod as it's coming through, hanging up on the back here, right as it's coming through. A little bit hanging up there, but if I lift it, that will be suspended once it gets attached to our linkage. So basically, we want to make sure we lift that up about center, and then you can see what happens. I start working the accelerator pedal there. You can see everything's working just like it should. Actually, it feels really good. You can see what's going on with the rod in there. Nothing's binding. Seems to be in the right location, and also seems to be a right amount of clearance around that bushing. And then also you can see without the bushing in there, quite a bit up and down action with that. So I'm just going to set that metal bushing in there, just very relaxed, and then try moving it by hand again and see how it feels. Putting that in there, you can see now I'm sliding it from the rear, just moving it gently. No up and down forces on that, but you can see the front here. It's got a little bit of movement on that. However, if I pinch down on those tabs a little too tight, I think I'm actually going to create almost like a seizing type action. So I'm going to leave those tabs secure enough to hold the bushing in there, but also loose enough that that bushing can adjust itself as it's needed when we're working the accelerator rod. It's going to need to move around a little bit. Plus, we're going to go ahead and put a little synthetic grease on there. Okay, let me grease those up and see what it looks like. Okay, so we got our synthetic grease in place, and just working that, I can tell we're not going to have any problems with that at all. No chance of that seizing up along the way or catching or snagging on anything. Once we get this back end hooked up to our linkage on the engine, should be no problem. Let me just stick a couple reference pictures in here of this front area and the back as it was when we disassembled. Okay guys, so it looks like we are going to have a good working accelerator pedal. We can thank Stephen in Texas for helping us out with that. So what happened is Stephen had reached out to me after I uploaded our first video on installing tunnel lines and was asking, was there a reason I didn't put the accelerator rod bushings in there? He was restoring a 912 and didn't know whether he should put them in or not. I just basically let Stephen know, no, I wasn't even aware there was such a part to fit in that location, even though we had evidence of nothing being in there from the state my car was in. This car, a pretty good example of a fairly unmolested condition car. However, you still don't know whether things get lost in servicing or from car to car. Things happen in the factory. Sometimes parts make it on the car, sometimes they don't. However, in this case, completely unaware of those bushings. Also, no reference to them in the manual, what they are, where they locate, or how to install them. So really, really important to rely on knowledge sharing anytime somebody's got something to offer. So thanks a lot, Stephen. We really appreciate the help on those bushings. Okay, guys, let's go back in the shop and take a look at that shifter rod and shifter coupler and see what's involved in putting that together. So let's start first with the front of our shifter rod. Put together our carrier bracket, ball cup, and new bushing down inside there. Put our screw on with safety washer, and this is going to go on the front end area here. And you see I've done some sanding with some wet 800 grit paper. The reason I've done that, I went ahead and coated this shifter rod with some POR 15. However, with that paint on there, the clearance and tolerance for our carrier bracket a little bit too tight. So sanding that down, even to bare metal, and even this smooth, still very tight in there. So smooth as I can get it for now. I think with a little bit of grease on there, we should be all right. Okay, let's set the tripod up, put that one together first. So first let's put our carrier bracket on there and guide. Slide that on there. Next we'll put our ball cup on there, and we're just going to line these two holes up. And about there. See that down inside there. And then we're going to put our screw in there. Just hand tighten that. Next we're going to go ahead and install our safety wire. So this is the original I pulled off of there, just saved for diameter, but it looks like about 18 gauge is what that is. So what I'm going to do is use 18 gauge copper, double twisted, and there's still plenty of size to go through that hole. See there, get that guy through there, and then we'll go ahead and tie that up so I can't back out. Okay, that should be tight enough. Just trim the excess. Push that up inside. Okay, that should hold that in there. So I'm going with a new shift rod coupler, complete unit from Porsche. The reason I'm switching this whole unit out is my casing actually has a crack in here. But they do make some real nice aftermarket shift rod couplers if you want a little bit tighter shift feel to it, or you don't want to change out your bushings. However, if you want to change your bushings, this is what they look like. Real simple to do. Just go ahead and drift this dowel out of here, pull the pin, switch out your new bushings from the inside. They press right in there, and then put your pin back in and reset it with your dowel. Real simple to do. Okay, so anyways, this guy's just going to slide in the back end here. We're going to have to go ahead and put our clamp on here first and get that on there, and then this is just going to press in from here. However, we can't really set the distance on that for now because we have to adjust the throw on it according to shift pattern once we get our transmission set up. So for now we'll just go ahead and put our bolt in here, snug this down just so we don't lose it, and get ready to place it in the tunnel. And then once we have our clamp in place, you can see that little indent in there. Bolt's going to line right up with that indent. And for now, we just finger tight is good. Okay, back end is set up about as far as we can take it until we get our transmission put into place. Okay, and then last, before we go ahead and slide this in the back of the tunnel, just go ahead and put a good coat of synthetic grease on there. Okay, a little bit better sliding action there. Shouldn't have any problems with that. Although most of the action is going to take place right up in here. And then grease up our ball socket. Plenty of grease in there. Place that guy down inside. Okay, here we go. And then just kind of squeeze our dust boot through there. Okay. All right, let's go inside, take a look. Okay, so we got everything in place there. Only difficulty I had was really from this section here to this section here. Very busy with parts and pieces in there, trying to get this carrier bracket through. But if I turn it on its side this way and work it from this side, it seemed to go in a little bit easier. Okay, let's go back in the shop, put our shifter together, bring her out, and put her in. All right, so our shifter here, just a quick overview of what we need to do to put this together. Everything's ready to go. The only thing I had to do is I had to make up this special tool here. What I did is I took a 9/16 speed bore bit and modified that with a little die grinder, ground the tip off, and that's going to be used to press these springs in. That's really the only difficult thing to assemble this. Okay, so let's just go ahead and start setting this guy up and put her together. So first thing we're going to do, we're going to grease up the inside of this housing or shifter ball to set in. Plenty of grease in there. Okay, and then we're going to grease up our shifter. Okay, that's going to slide in from this side. Okay, you can see that little peg in there. It just lines up with that peg. Alright, and then we take our spring, put a little grease on that. Alright, that one's going to go in there. And then it's going to set against, or up inside, that little peg right there. That little peg right in there. It's going to set right up against there. Okay, so then we're going to put this guy in place. Then you can see this has got a little notch here. That also is going to line up with a peg. See a little peg right in there. Right there. Okay. It just kind of presses in there. Okay, so this spring is a little bit tricky. So what we want to do, we want to put the dowel in almost all the way. See how very little sticking out on this end. That'll keep this spring as straight as possible. And there's a little bit of a taper on it. We want the tapered side on the inside. We want the upside on the outside. So what we're trying to do is we're just trying to get it up under this lip here. Right under here, and then roll it in. Making sure your fingers are on top of this at all times. You're going to be pressing so hard if that thing lets go. It'll go right through your fingers. Okay. And I'm just going to massage it in with my thumb. And there it is. Okay, now we'll drive the pin through there. Let's go ahead and clip that one in place so that doesn't pop out of there while we're putting the back one in. So the back one here, a lot trickier than the front one. So what we want to do, we want to shim up the housing from underneath. I'm using about a 1/2 inch pair of pliers here. Our stem is out about 1 inch, buried down into the padding there. Slip our spring over there. And then we're going to be pressing extremely hard, making sure our fingers are on top of the spring and not below the pressure of our tool. Okay, it's in. Okay, now we're in. Now we're safe. Okay, put those 2 circlips on. We're ready to go. Okay, that's in place. And then the last thing I want to do before we put it back in the car, I want to fill this void area in here and lube up these springs with some of our synthetic grease. So you just pack it in there. Okay, I think she's ready to go. Alright, back out here at the tunnel, so you can see everything's going to line up here now with our bolts. Ball socket's going to drop down into our shifter rod, and then this heater control lever is going to pull up through the inside of that slot. Let me go ahead and wrestle with all this, get it nutted down, and then we'll take a look at it. Okay, that went pretty smooth. So we got everything in place, in proper location, and everything seems to be working real well. Temporarily, I have the back suspended by placing our boot over the rear of the tunnel there. That helps carry the shifter rod. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch out the synthetic grease on top here, top of this ball area, to a petroleum base general purpose grease. And the reason I like to do that, as a general rule, I like to use petroleum-based grease, anything metal to metal, anything you have metal to plastic or to polyurethane or to rubber, then you probably want to switch out to synthetic grease. So everything below this ball is really best suited for synthetic. I'm going to go ahead and fill this cavity with petroleum grease, and then we'll take a look at it. Alright, so there's our finished product there. So then last but not least, we're going to do our handbrake. So what we want to do, we want to put a little lubrication on our two cables coming through there. Let's go back in the shop, take a look at that guy. It's pretty much all put together. Just go over a couple of things, put a little lube on there, and then we'll bring her out and set her up. So here's a look at our handbrake. This has all been refinished, ready to go. I hadn't really taken too much apart on this one. Just basically cleaned it up, repainted it, and refinished the handle on here. So the only thing really worth noting is going to be this set screw here. And what that does, you have some electrical contact points. This is where our wire plugs into the back here for the dashboard light. So when our handbrake sets, what's happening when our handle is pulled up, we make contact to our copper points in here, and that turns your light on the dash. And then when we set down, it swings away from it. Hard to see in there, but there's a little bit of a gap in there. That's going to break the ground and then turn the light off. Other than that, we just need to grease this up on the inside and put her in. Alright, general purpose grease is probably best for this here, and then using a paintbrush to get it down in there. It'd be hard to load that up with grease. The bristles will help get it in between everything. Even if we get a little grease on our contacts, it's okay. It'll work right through that. Don't have to have gobs and gobs on here, but we do want some. Make sure everything's moving nicely. Alright, I think that's going to work fine. Let's go put her in. So back under the car, looking at our cable. So what I've done is I've maxed out the adjustment all the way till it bottoms out on the left side and then also on the right side. And what that's going to do, that's going to equalize the length of the cables coming through the inside of the tunnel. So let's go inside and take a look at that. So right now both these cables are pulled taut forward, so that's maxed all the way in our setting down below, pulled all the way forward. And with that location, we should be able to slip our handbrake right in those in one shot. Alright, that just pops right in there so you can see. Now I've got tension pulled forward, the handbrake is pulled up. That's how you're going to get it in there. And then both of those are equal length to each other, which is where it needs to be. So then we'll set it back down and then lower the handbrake. You can see now all our bolt holes are going to line up. And then we can sight through our peak holes here. Be able to tell our levers are in the right spot. Okay, let me bolt that down. We'll take a look at her. Alright, so got everything bolted down and in place. Also, both cables are balanced out down below as best I can get them. So let's take a look through our peak holes here and see how this thing pulls under full adjustment. So what the manual wants is 4 clicks for our initial setting to lock the brake shoes. So here's the left side and right side. So let's go ahead and pull those and see how that looks. 1, 2, 3, 4. So basically balanced on both sides there. Let's go down below, take a look at the difference in cable lengths and see how that looks. So here's our left side handbrake off, and so you can hear just slightly the rotor just ever so slightly brushing the brake shoes in there. That's about where you want it, because once we start driving it, those things are going to seat in there and eventually wear down. But basically we're free, just barely skimming. Let's take a look at the right side. And then the right side, you can see it looks like a little bit longer adjustment on that, but those are locked down now and where they need to be. So same thing on this, you can hear just a slight bit of rubbing, and right there is where she should be. Okay, once I set that handbrake, both of these are locked and don't move at all, so they are balanced. Alright, so we're starting to see some progress. A couple more things striked off our list. Next video, we're going to see some wheels on this car and back on the ground. Well, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next video.